You know, during the reign of King Henry IV of England, and I'm not going to assume you would place King Henry's reign specifically, so he reigned up to the year 1413. During his reign, English knights were required to bathe at least once in their lifetime. And that bath would typically occur right immediately before the ceremony of their receiving their knighthood. And because of this, knights who were so knighted in King Henry's reign were known as Knights of the Bath. Now, thankfully, personal hygiene has stepped up a little bit since then. The American Cleaning Institute, which used to be the Soap and Detergent Association, did a survey in 2009 of 886 Americans, 446 men, 442 women, about their hand washing habits. And what they found was that 50% of the respondents said that they washed their hands more than 10 times a day. 20% said they washed their hands 7 to 10 times a day. 28% said it was 3 to 6 times a day. And 1% admitted that they only washed 1 time a day. You may not be surprised to know that the women respondents in this poll said 67% of the time that they washed at least 10 times a day, whereas the total for the men, you might expect, was a little bit less. Around 37% of men said they do that. Now, according to the soap people, when you wash, you need to wash for at least 15 to 20 seconds. You need to really lather it up, or you're really not going to do the job. But the survey showed that only half of everybody really does that. And then the survey found that 1/3 of all respondents report that they don't wash their hands at all before lunch. There were some other disturbing hand-washing statistics that I'm not going to go there. But this brings us to the debate that Jesus finds himself in our gospel from Mark, where he's been tangling a little bit with some of the scribes and Pharisees who really zeroed in on some rules around how is it that you follow the Sabbath exactly, and how is it that you manage your cleanliness and dietary rules, so that we read the Pharisees and some of the scribes noticed that some of the disciples were eating with defiled hands, that is, they weren't washing. So they asked Jesus, why do your disciples not live according to the tradition of elders, but eat with defiled hands? You know, as we know, there are many regulations and guidelines in the book of Leviticus or Numbers around some of these personal habits, and then all sorts of other ways of managing our lives. But over the centuries, an oral law came into being. It kept on growing, maintained by rabbis beyond the biblical scriptural text, to layer hundreds and hundreds of rules from all different perspectives about life. Hand washing had a 3-step process. You started by taking your hands and you would hold them so your fingertips were going down, and then you would pour water, and the water had to be at least the equivalent of 1 1/3 eggshell fulls of water that you would pour starting on your wrist, so then it would run down over your fingers. Then you do the same on the other hand. Then while your hands were still wet, you would take a fist and you would cleanse your hand by working your fist all across your hand. And then you would take your hands down again, and you would pour your 1 1/3 eggshell full, at least, of water on each hand, and you would be done. The cleaning of cooking implements was more complex. If you had a hollow tubular vessel for cleaning, it could get unclean on the inside, but not on the outside. But if it became unclean on the inside, it was touched by an unclean food, or somehow an unclean person touched it, it had to be broken into pieces. And the smallest piece could not be any larger than would hold the amount of oil needed to anoint your baby toe. To cure uncleanliness and unclean vessels, those earthen vessels, as we said, had to be broken, but other vessels could be immersed, boiled, purged with fire, and as Mark mentions in our scripture this morning, polished. Observant Jews took these traditions really seriously, to the point that there was a time in the rule of a Syrian king. And this king, who was a horrible king, commanded a group of Jews to eat pork. And they refused, and hundreds died. And then there was the rabbi who was put in prison by the Romans, and he almost died of thirst because he would take his meager ration of water each day and use it to clean himself. So when Jesus challenges these traditions of hand washing and diet, it's a big deal. But before we get too long into this story, I want to ask you, where did you put yourself in this story? Who do you relate to? Would you say that you'd be with Jesus and his disciples, kind of questioning and challenging these traditions and rules of the day? Or might you put yourself with the scribes and the Pharisees, saying, you need to be doing these things that we practice in our society? You know, it's easy to condemn the scribes and the Pharisees for being so rigid. And the story is almost not even three-dimensional. It's kind of flat the way we often portray Pharisees and scribes. But we need to remember the bigger picture of their adherence to these rules, because remember, as a people, Palestine is conquered time and again by foreign invaders who come in and bring their religions of multiple gods, little g. And so the Pharisees and the scribes, by maintaining these rules and regulations, it was a way of keeping the people separate. And while there are all this minutia, it was, in the big picture, it was an effort so that the people would hold on to the most important tradition of all, and that being of following, believing in, honoring one God, which was always at risk. But Jesus, and his point was that the Pharisees and the scribes, by pursuing all these rules with the intensity that they did, was that they were losing the essence of their spiritual following. Jesus accused them of being hypocrites. All that was important was for people to follow all these little individual rules, these man-made rules. And that so long as they followed these man-made rules, it didn't matter what was in their heart. That they could consider that they were godly. So even if you washed your hands, if you did that, if you refused to take a meal with your brother or your sister, you were in good standing before God, following all these rules. So long as you kept up with the cleaning of all these implements, you were okay in God's sight. But Jesus quotes to the people the prophet Isaiah, "This people honors me with their lips, but their hearts are far from me. In vain do they worship me, teaching human precepts as doctrines." There was a church where the property committee decided to repaint the narthex. The narthex had this beautiful pale blue hue that had been in the narthex for about 10 years, but it had started to chip and it had started to crack, so it was clear that it needed to be repainted. So a couple members of the property committee went down to the paint store that they always used, and they ordered the same paint that was used in the narthex because they wanted it to be the same from 10 years ago. And the clerk behind the counter said, "That paint was actually discontinued about 5 years ago, but this is the current equivalent. It's the same shade, but instead of that particular title, it has this other title, but it's essentially the same paint." So they bought the paint, they went to the church, and on Friday and Saturday they spent 10 hours each day repainting 2 coats the entire narthex. Then they gathered the tarps Sunday morning and just put them off into the corner with the leftover paint cans. And people started coming in for worship. A woman came up to the chair of the property committee and said, "Why did you change the color of the narthex?" And the property chair said, "We didn't change the color of the narthex. It's essentially the same color as it's been for 10 years. "No, you changed it. I can tell." "How can you tell?" "I read the labels on the cans." "This people honors me with their lips, but their hearts are far from me." Do these words of Jesus strike home for us in any way in our own lives, at home, at school, at work? Do we follow traditions or rules to such an extent here in this place, in our life here at Blue Ridge, to the extent that these traditions and rules that we follow outweigh, block, trump, preempt, inhibit us from fully embracing and living the gospel message of loving God and one another with all our heart, soul, strength, and mind? Pheme Perkins is a professor of theology at Boston College, and she sums up the gospel message today in, I thought, a nice way, in which she says, "The sayings on defilement challenge us to think about the real challenge posed by the gospel. It would, in fact, be much easier to follow any number of ritual practices than to transform our hearts." So the question of this sermon comes down to not how many times do you wash your hands in a given day, but rather, how often do we wash our hearts? The 51st Psalm is said to be David's plea to God after his whole excesses and affronts with Bathsheba. And he writes, "Have mercy on me, O God, according to your steadfast love. Wash me thoroughly from my iniquity and cleanse me from my sin. Create in me a clean heart, O God, and put a new and right spirit within me." So how do we go about washing our hearts? 2 suggestions. The first is simply to spend time with God, spend time in prayer, in meditation, offering your prayers to the Lord, but also just sitting there in the presence of the Lord and listening. Like hand washing, just a few seconds doesn't really get the job done. So we need to get comfortable and spend some time with the Lord each day. Second, we can follow what Marjorie Thompson outlines in her book, Soul Feast, in which she describes a discipline of self-examination at the end of each day. She doesn't use the phrase washing your heart, but I do. So washing your heart has 5 steps, either at the end of your day or the beginning of the next, if you're a morning person. Step 1 is to gather the day that had passed. Just think, what happened today or yesterday? What were the 5 or 10 main things that happened? What was the conversation that you remember from work or at home, or what interaction did you have at church, or whatever was it that happened during the course of your day? Then 2, review your day. Consider each of those events and what happened and what was my own role in those events in my day? How did I respond? 3, confess our sin. Acknowledge, how was it that we fell short today? And then give thanks for the day. Give thanks for the presence of God throughout our day. And then last, seek meaning in the day. What is God saying to me in my life? What is God asking me to do? Now, the American Heart Association does not keep statistics on how often we wash our hearts. They don't survey people on that. But by washing our hearts, we will awaken ourselves to the presence of God in our life. We will be more mindful of how we respond to God's grace in our life. And as we do, we will be renewed in our love for the Lord and our love for one another. Amen.